Hey guys, it's Miss Marker. So I'm going to be reading this text, Growing Up Asian in America, and I will be pausing a couple times to demonstrate with the first couple paragraphs for you doing the annotation process we've been working on. So I'll be annotating for quick summaries of paragraph main ideas. Then I'll be annotating for evidence about what it means to be American. Then I'll be demonstrating any connections or questions that I think of in response to the text. Oops, sorry. And then I'll also be focusing on identifying any new vocabulary that I might be adding to our class vocab list, and then a summary of the whole thing at the end. Remember with evidence that we need to go into reading a text with a specific purpose in mind, and we'll be looking for evidence that addresses this purpose. So I'm just going to make the note that the reason we're reading this text is to determine what it means to be American. And so that's the evidence I'll be looking for as I read. Okay. Growing Up Asian in America by Kasaya E. Noda. Sometimes when I was growing up, my identity seemed to hurtle toward me and paste itself right to my face. I felt that way, encountering the stereotypes of my race perpetuated by non-Japanese people, primarily white, who may or may not have had contact with other Japanese in America. "You don't like cheese, do you?" someone would ask. "I know your people don't like cheese." Sometimes questions came making allusions to history. That was another aspect of the identity. Events that had happened quite apart from the me who stood silent in that moment, connected my face with an incomprehensible past. "Your parents were in California? Were they in those camps during the war?" And sometimes there were phrases or nicknames, Lotus Blossom. I was sometimes addressed or referred to as racially Japanese, sometimes as Japanese American, and sometimes as an Asian woman. Confusions and distortions abounded. Okay, so I'm going to pause at the end of that paragraph and quickly do a 1 to 3 sentence summary about what I think it is mainly about. So as I look back, this woman, author Kasaya Noda, is talking about different stereotypes she encountering stereotypes, mostly of white people in America. And here are some examples she gives about the stereotypes being in concentration camps or the type of food that Japanese people like. So overall, I'm going to put stereotypes of Japanese in America as my 1, 2, 3. I guess this is actually going to be 5 sentence summary. Okay, and next I'm looking for any evidence of what it means to be an American, and a lot of this is focused, as I've summarized, about stereotypes of Japanese, but there is this reference to "your people don't like cheese, do you? We know you don't like cheese." And so the underlying, I think, assumption in that is that Japanese people don't like cheese, and the other side of that is that Americans do like cheese, and that's an American quality. So I'm going to highlight that as something about sort of a silly definition, but what it means to be American. There's certain cuisine that's part of the American culture, cheese being part of that, I guess. Okay, so once I've found my evidence, then I'm going to look, are there any big questions that come out of this or connections that I make? And actually, since I'm focused on this cheese piece, the first thing that sort of came to mind for me in that was, let me change the color of this for a connection. So a connection that I make to this is actually to Ricky's definition from the first week of school. Talked about cheese in a sort of silly way that I thought was really clever. So that made me think of that. That's my connection. And then any other vocabulary words that stand out to me as new or something that I don't know, I'm going to circle. So here, incomprehensible past, I might not know what that means. Comprehend is part of that. I might recognize, means to understand, so incomprehensible would mean that I can't understand it. But maybe that's a new word. And then also distortions. I might not know the word distortion, so I would circle those 2 words and maybe add them to the class list later this week. Okay, so we're going to keep reading. How is one to know and define oneself? From the inside, within a context that is self-defined, from a grounding in a community and a connection with culture and history that are comfortably accepted, or from the outside, in terms of messages received from the media and people who are often ignorant? Even as an adult, I can still see two sides of my face and past. I can see from the inside out in freedom, and I can see from the outside in, driven by the old voices of childhood and lost in anger and fear. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to pause your video here and do these annotations on your own before you compare them to mine. So main idea in 1 to 3 words, then you're going to look for evidence about what it means to be American, then you'll make any connections or any questions that come up from this text, and then finally you'll circle any unknown words to add to your vocabulary list. Okay, so pause your video here, and then you can unpause and compare it to my notes. Okay, so here you can see my annotations for this paragraph, my 1 to 3 sentence summary, still a little bit longer than I'd like, but is inside versus outside self definitions. And then I have this question. She's talking about people defining themselves by their own inner understanding of self or via the outward messages they're getting from society and media. So I thought about what are the outside messages that different groups of people receive from the media and society. And then here was a word that I felt like might be new for some people, ignorant, so I circled that. I actually didn't highlight any evidence because I don't really think that this paragraph has anything specific to say about what it means to be American. It's just more about the different ways that people can define themselves personally. So I didn't highlight anything for that. Okay, let's keep going. I am racially Japanese. A voice from my childhood says, "You are other, you are less than, you are unalterably alien." This voice has its own history. We have indeed been seen as other and alien since the early years of our arrival in the United States. The very first immigrants were welcomed and sought as laborers to replace the dwindling numbers of Chinese whose influx had been cut off by the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. The Japanese fell natural heir to the same anti-Asian prejudice that had arisen against the Chinese. As soon as they began striking for better wages, they were no longer welcomed. I can see myself today as a person historically defined by law and custom as being forever alien. Being neither free white nor African, our people in California were deemed aliens ineligible for citizenship, no matter how long they intended to stay here. Aliens ineligible for citizenship were prohibited from owning, buying, or leasing land. They did not and could not belong here. The voice in me remembers that I am always a Japanese American in the eyes of many. A third-generation German American is an American. A third-generation Japanese American is a Japanese American. Being Japanese means being a danger to the country during the war and knowing how to use chopsticks. I wear this history on my face. So pause your video here and summarize these 2 paragraphs in 1 to 3 words. Mark your evidence about what it means to be American if you see anything here that applies. Circle any unknown words and also make any connections to what you read or jot down any questions that come up for you as you've read. Okay, so let's keep reading. I move to the other side. I see a different light and claim a different context. My race is a line that stretches across ocean and time to link me to the shrine where my grandmother was raised. 2 high white banners lift in the wind at the top of the stone steps leading to the shrine. It is time for the summer festival. Black characters are written against the sky as boldly as the clouds, as lightly as kites, as sharply as the big black crows I used to see above the fields in New Hampshire. At festival time there is liquor and food, ritual, discipline, and abandonment. There is music and drunkenness and invocation. There is hope. Another season has come, another season has gone. Pause here. Do your annotations. I am racially Japanese. I have a certain claim to this crazy place where the prayers intoned by a neighboring Shinto priest standing in for my grandmother's nephew who is sick are drowned out by the rehearsals for the pop singing contest in which most of the villagers will compete later that night. The village elders, the priest, and I stand respectfully upon the immaculate, shining wooden floor of the outer shrine, bowing our heads before the hidden powers. During the patchy intervals, when I can hear him, I notice the priest has a stutter. His voice flutters up to my ears only occasionally because two men and a woman are singing gustily into a microphone in the compound, testing the sound system. A pre-recorded tape of guitars, samisens, and drums accompanies them, rock music and Shinto prayers. That night, to loud applause and cheers, a young man is given the award for the most netsusurtsu, passionate, burning, a rendition of a song. We roar our approval of the reward. Never mind that his voice had wandered and slid, now slightly above, now slightly below, the given line of the melody. Netsuritsu, netsuritsu. Okay, pause. Make any annotations you need to do. In the morning, my grandmother's sister kneels at the foot of the stone stairs to offer her morning prayers. She is too crippled to climb the stairs, so each morning she kneels here upon the path. She shuts her eyes for a few seconds, her motions as matter of fact as when she washes rice. I linger longer than she does, so reluctant to leave, savoring the connection I feel with my grandmother in America, the past, and the power that lives and shines in the morning sun. Our family has served this shrine for generations. The family's need to protect this claim to identity and place outweighs any individual claim to any individual hope. I am Japanese. Pause. Do your annotations. I am a Japanese American. Weak. I hear the voice from my childhood years. Passive, I hear. Our parents and grandparents were the ones who were put into those camps. They went without resistance. They offered cooperation as proof of loyalty to America. Victim, I hear, and silent. Our parents are painted as hard workers who were socially uncomfortable and had difficulty expressing even the smallest opinion, clean, quiet, motivated, and determined to match the American way. That is us, and that is the story of our time here. Pause. Do your annotations. Why did you go into those camps? I raged at my parents, frightened by my own inner silence and timidity. Why didn't you do anything to resist? Why didn't you name it the injustice it was? Couldn't our parents even think? Couldn't they? Why were they so passive? I shift my vision and my stance. I am in California. My uncle is in the midst of the sweet potato harvest. He is pressed, trying to get the harvesting crews onto the field as quickly as possible, worried about the flow of equipment and people. His big pickup is pulled off to the side, motor running, door ajar. I see two tractors in the yard in front of an old shed. The flatbed harvesting platform in which the workers will stand has already been brought over from the other field. It's early morning. The workers stand loosely grouped and at ease, but my uncle looks as harried and tense as a police officer trying to unsnarl a New York City traffic jam. Driving toward the shed, I pull my car off the road to make way for an approaching tractor. The front wheels of the car sink luxuriously into the soft white sand by the roadside, and the car slides to a dreamy halt, tail still on the road. I try to move forward, I try to move back. The front bites contentedly into the sand. The back lifts itself at a jaunty angle. My uncle sees me and storms down the road, running. He is shouting before he is even near me. "What the matter with you?" he screams. "What the hell are you doing?" In his frenzy, he grabs his hat off his head and slashes it through the air across his knee. He is beside himself. "You've blocked the whole roadway. How am I supposed to get my tractors out of here? Can't you use your head? You've cut off the whole roadway, and we've got to get out of here." I stand on the road before him helplessly, thinking, No, I don't know how to drive in sand. I've never driven in sand. "I'm sorry, Uncle," I say, bearing a smile beneath a look of sincere apology. I notice my deep amusement and my affection for him with great curiosity. I am usually devastated by anger, not this time. During the several years that follow, I learn about the people and the place and much more about what has happened in this California village where my parents grew up. They say our grandparents made this settlement in the desert. Their first crops were eaten by rabbits and ravaged by insects. The land was so barren that men walked from house to house, sometimes got lost. Women came here too. They bore children in 114-degree heat, then carried the babies with them into the fields to nurse when they reached the end of each row of grapes or other truck farm crops. I had no idea what it meant to buy this kind of land and make it grow green, or how, when the war came, there was no space for all the subtlety of being who we were, Japanese Americans. Either or was the way. I hadn't understood that people were literally afraid for their lives then, that their money had been frozen in banks, that there was a 5-mile travel limit, that when the early evening curfew came and they were inside their houses, some of them watched helplessly as people they knew went into their barns to steal their Okay, I'm actually going to stop reading here because the video is going to cut me off, but you should finish reading this text, the last few paragraphs on your own, and don't forget at the very end of it that you should summarize the entire story in 2 to 3 sentences at the very end. Okay, happy reading. I will see you guys to discuss this text tomorrow.